Well, we've been talking about impermanence kind of a lot lately, but I'm finding that it's not enough to get integrated in here. We were reflecting on the impermanence of phenomena this morning in our analytical meditation, and it's just what I'm seeing more and more is how the many, many subtle levels of gross impermanence that I cling to. I will give you an example. I chiefly do the gardening or oversee the garden here, and it's not been a great gardening summer. You know, it was kind of cool for most of the summer, and we had a big, I don't know, our little 4x4 plot was full of basil, which didn't do so well. It needs heat. It thrives in heat, and then it just goes berserk. And then the fantasy is at the end of the season, then you can make buckets and buckets of pesto that you put in the freezer, and then you can live on it all winter. So I have a little attachment going here. I have a little, belief that there is some intrinsic happiness that will like nurture us for months in this basil. And it's not growing. But at the end of the season, it got quite hot. So we actually ended up with a pretty good little crop. We've had some pesto out of it. It's been very nice. So as it got cold again, I went out and harvested it all, a bag about like that, with this idea that it would all get turned into pesto. So someone very kindly offered to do that, and she did make a nice batch of pesto, but she only used half, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the bag. So when I came back to make more, I found that the leaves had been chopped into lunch. And my fantasy of pesto in the freezer and these plants that I had nurtured since we put them in the seeds in the ground last April, and this whole relationship just like came crashing to my head, and I was not so very kind at that moment to the person who had put them in the lunch, I don't think. I think I controlled my mouth, but the energy wasn't so good. So fortunately, I could go away and think about it and think, do I want to spend my life in the hell realms for a handful of leaves? I think not. So I came back and apologized, and the person was extremely receptive to that. But it just shows me when something happens unexpectedly, when I have a plan, where do I go? I don't go to, c'est la vie. I mean, sometimes. But clearly, I was quite invested in this basil and quite invested in this pesto. And the more and more vividly the thought comes to me, someday, maybe today, I am suddenly going to realize that I'm dying. And I didn't plan it today. For sure it's not on my calendar. For sure it won't be the way that I had imagined it. And am I still going to be going to the hell realms for a handful of leaves? Is that where my mind will go? So it's a good motivation to get a handle on how I and we kind of chronically grip onto things and expect them to be the same, expect them to be the way we think they should be. I mean, our whole agenda is right there. So paying attention to where our mind goes when we're surprised by anything, whether someone is intentionally harming us or accidentally says something that sends us through the roof, or whether we stumble with the big thing of fresh made whatever that just came for lunch and it shatters all over the floor. Where does your mind go? I'm not putting a pox on lunch. But, so I have found, Venerable Children taught a little while ago on Asanga's meditations on impermanence. And he has kind of an expanded thing just on gross impermanence, which I have found really helpful. Obviously, it's not transforming my attachment to pesto yet, but I thought they would be worth sharing because I think it's a pretty important thing for us to transform our minds about in order to make our lives more peaceful, really, and to make us more aware of how we respond to things so we're not creating negative karma over and over and over again. It really helps with our afflictions. And grappling on to things as permanent is one huge way that we really create a lot of negative mental karma in our minds and then speak often. So, so he suggests that we spend a lot of time and he says over and over and over, first of all, thinking about the changes that happens within the person. So how our bodies change from, birth to now is one kind of really gross one. How our complexion and physique and health fluctuate over the course of a lifetime, how people's complexion and look change after exertion or after they're ill, you know, just these little changes that happen in a person alone. He talks about being aware of our feelings, you know, how quickly our pleasant feelings, our unpleasant feelings, and our neutral feelings change. And the same with the afflictions. And of course, meditating on the body that becomes a corpse and how the corpse decomposes also. And then he says, then take your image outside and look at the external world. So how the natural world changes. Not just the seasons, which are really gross, but how you can recognize a tree has changed over a period of time. How buildings change over a period of time. Man-made things, human-made things, are natural things. So training our minds to look not at the appearance of something, boom, there, but training our minds to see it in its transitory state. And that's just gross impermanence. So I have a real fascination with subtle impermanence. But if I can't get over this trip about, you know, the basil that I've nurtured all summer, I'll never get to subtle impermanence. So never is a wrong thing to say. I will definitely get to subtle impermanence, but I want to spend a fair amount of time on this gross impermanence thing and pay attention to my reactions to sudden changes or surprises, because they happen all day long. So I offer that as actually some really good analytic meditations are very, very useful. And hopefully we will all let go more easily and support each other on the path.